Continuing in on the lower part of the body, right here you have your kidney that's opened up to show the pyramids, which contain the glomerulus to filter the blood. And then the blood flows, or the cleaned blood goes back through the renal artery and veins. And then the waste, the urine waste, goes down through the ureter, down to the bladder, which is actually part of the umbilical cord in this fetal pig. There's the umbilical artery next to it. This is the dorsal aorta, and right next to it underneath there is the vena cava. And then these branches down here into the hip area, we have common iliac, deep iliac circumflex, external iliac, and internal iliac, which is underneath. Then it becomes the femoral and the deep femoral. This is the ductus deferens of the boy, which carries the sperm. And this little tube right through here is the penis of the boy. This would be the rectum that forms the waste, the solid waste material. This is the spleen that recycles red blood cells. And there's, you have the umbilical vein, which you cut to open up the piggy. You have the lobes of the lungs. You have cranial, middle, and caudal, and then accessory. And those 7 lobes help exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. Moving on with the circulatory system, here we have the heart. And at the top of the heart in blue is the superior vena cava. And in the bottom is the inferior vena cava. And those two dump into the right atrium, which is big because it's receiving blood from the body. Then it goes through the tricuspid valve, which is right in there, and dumps into the right ventricle. The right ventricle pumps it out through the pulmonary trunk, and through the pulmonary trunk it goes to the pulmonary arteries, away but low oxygenated, to the lungs, and back into the pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins dump into the left atria. It's small because it's coming from the lungs little left, into the left ventricle through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve has 2 cusps, and there you have the large left ventricle because it's going to pump a lot of blood up and out through the aorta right there, so it goes to the body to get blood, oxygenated blood, and nutrients to the body. Up in the throat of the pig, a couple of arteries to know. You have right here the brachiocephalic artery, and then you have the brachiocephalic vein that dumps the blood into the vena cava. The brachiocephalic takes the blood up to, and these haven't been dissected out, but right here is the carotid artery, and then over here through this thymus would be the jugular vein, nice and big and blue. There's a little part of it right there. Let's see. All right, this gland on the side of the face is the parotid gland, and it secretes saliva, which helps with the digestive system. Inside the mouth is the hard palate with the oral rugae, which help form the food into a bolus. The tongue helps manipulate food to make the bolus. On the tongue there are the foliate papillae on the side. Get it? Foliate, like leafy. And those are for taste and texture. The opening for this opening right here is called the laryngeal pharynx, and this is the nasal pharynx under the soft palate, and the oral pharynx above the soft palate. Nasal is for air, oral is for food. The epiglottis is this little flap that covers the glottis during swallowing so the piggy doesn't choke, and the probe is now in the esophagus, which leads all the way to the stomach. Within the chest cavity are this gland called the thymus gland, which contains immunities for the fetal pig. This little brown bean that's missing on this pig, it's right below the larynx. Right here on the trachea is the thyroid gland that secretes thyroxine to regulate metabolism. The stomach has a characteristic J shape right here, and that is to help mechanically digest food. It has a low pH to help pepsin break down proteins. The top opening of the stomach to the esophagus right here is the cardiac valve, which regulates backflow and doesn't allow for acid to get up in the esophagus. And the rugae are the folds in the stomach for expansion. The pyloric valve is on the lower end of the stomach, and that has the chyme, which is digested food, go into the first section of the small intestine, which is called the duodenum. The duodenum is for digestion of nutrients. The pancreas secretes lipase, which enters here, and the bile is also secreted here to digest the food. The liver is really big in the fetal pig, and it has three functions: store glycogen, secrete bile, and secrete enzymes. And then this little green bag underneath is the gallbladder, which concentrates the bile. There are three ducts: cystic, hepatic, and common bile, and those are for flow of bile. The little cottage cheesy thing under the stomach right here is the pancreas, which secretes insulin to regulate blood sugar, and lipase to break down fat, and amylase to break down carbohydrates. The jejunal ileum is this mass of squiggly stuff that contain the villi to absorb the nutrients. At the end of the small intestine is this finger-like dead end called the cecum, which contains microorganisms to digest cellulose. The colon is this part right here, which absorbs water and minerals. The lower jaw is called the mandible to crush the food. The little bone that you cut when you opened up here is the hyoid bone right here, and that's the floating bone that the muscle attaches of the tongue. The zygomatic arch is the cheekbone on the top of the jaw, and the caudal vertebrae are the vertebrae in the tail. A temporal muscle is up here on the side of the head. It's fan-shaped for chewing. The masseter is this big muscle on the cheek for chewing as well. The diaphragm is the muscular partition between the abdominal and thoracic cavities. Stop.